The sky burned twice. A lone distress transmission drifted across known space, fragile and panicked, repeating on a broken loop. If you can hear this, hold your breath. They listen through air. The message spread faster than the destruction behind it, racing through relay satellites, emergency buoys, and derelict listening posts abandoned during older wars. It echoed in places where no voices had sounded in decades, carried forward by machines that did not understand fear but recognized urgency. Aboard the dawning horizon, the central holographic display projected the trembling waveform above the command deck. Admiral Mara Kestrel stood with her hands clasped behind her back, expression tight, posture rigid. Around her, officers exchanged uneasy glances but remained silent. The transmission restarted again, the broken cadence whispering through the speakers. If you can hear this, hold your breath. They listened through air. Source verification? Mara asked. The operations officer swallowed, tapping in the final checks. Triple confirmed, Admiral. Origin Selra Prime in the Kethari Concord. He hesitated, an unusual crack in the professionalism of the bridge. Additional scans confirm total vitrification. Define total, Mara said quietly. The officer exhaled. Surface scans indicate complete glassing, 98% at minimum. No biosigns, no atmospheric stability. Selra is gone. A faint shift of light marked the approach of Eroth'Kel, envoy to the human fleet. His skin, normally luminous with shifting bioluminescent patterns, dimmed to ashen gray. Selra, he whispered, was my homeworld. Mara turned to him, her voice gentle. We will investigate immediately, and we will find out what did this. But the officer wasn't finished. Admiral, the beacon was spliced. Mara's eyebrows drew together. Explain. Human encryption detected within the final broadcast. Someone, some human, added to it. A second message appeared in harsh, blocky letters, simple, unmistakable, desperate. If you can hear this, hold your breath. They listen through air. Mara's composure cracked just slightly. Set course for Selra Prime. Full relief protocol. All ships on alert. And notify Dr. Veit. Her voice hardened. His expertise is required. Dr. Elias Veit sat in his dimly lit office surrounded by floating sound holograms, languages, pressure waves, resonance patterns, alien vocal structures. At the center hovered the transmission waveform, rotating slowly like a wounded creature. When the call from the bridge came through, Mara's face appeared above his console. We need your interpretation, she said, tone clipped. Veit replayed the beacon. He leaned closer, studying the distortions, the trembling frequencies. If you can hear this, hold your breath. They listen through air. He muttered to himself. Sonic predators? Acoustic mines? Something biological responding to breath, speech, vibration. He folded his arms, brow furrowed. If the warning is literal, Admiral, then speaking may be lethal. Mara nodded. Report to Fleet Ops immediately. The screen dimmed, leaving Veit alone with the fading after image of the waveform. Selra Prime appeared through the viewport like a world caught mid-scream. The entire surface shimmered with an unnatural sheen, harsh, rippling, almost iridescent. Forests turned to glass spires. Mountain ranges frozen into liquid sculptures. Oceans replaced by vast fields of fused mineral plains. 98% vitrification, the science officer repeated solemnly as the fleet settled into orbit. Atmosphere unstable, no signs of survivors. Eroth'Kel pressed trembling hands to the reinforced glass, his skin flickering in stuttering patches of grief. We were a world of gardens. We were a world of song. The shuttle Asterion 3 descended toward the only structure left standing, a relief tower jutting from the crystalline surface like a single tooth in a shattered jaw. Mara stood near the cockpit as the shuttle landed, the crystalline ground refracting sunlight into long, violent fractures of color. Marine Campos ran a final check on her equipment. Dead world, she muttered. Whatever did this is long gone. Eroth'Kel shook his head slowly. Selra's voice would not vanish on its own. Something unnatural happened here. Inside the tower, lights flickered in and out, emergency systems fighting to remain alive. Panels cycled between Kethari script and human distress codes. The air itself felt heavy, thick with something unseen. Campos swept her light across a scorched metal wall, and the beam caught words burned into the alloy with violent, gouged strokes. Don't speak. Don't sing. Don't breathe loud. Veit examined the readings overlaying his visor. Residual atmospheric disturbances, he typed into their shared display. Something moved through this air recently, or left an imprint that still lingers. The silence inside the tower felt predatory, dense, almost listening. As they moved deeper inside, air density readings drifted far beyond predicted values. Nothing appeared on visible scans, but the sensation of thick, unsettled pressure filled every corner. Veit prepared a small device. A low-intensity pressure pulse, he typed. Silent, controlled. May reveal movement. Mara approved with a curt gesture. The pulse triggered, inaudible, but sensed as a faint harmonic vibration through their boots. At first, nothing shifted. Then, Veit's eyes widened as readings spiked. Microscopic movement everywhere, his display flashed. Submicroscopic particles reacting to the pulse. Campos took a step back. What is that? Her voice carried through her helmet, and the air rippled. A distortion, barely visible, a shimmer like warped heat, shot toward her faceplate and struck it with devastating force. Campos fell with a muffled cry as her visor cracked inward. Mara instinctively shouted her name. A second distortion slammed into her helmet, hard enough to stagger her. Veit typed in frantic bursts. Shut down all sound transmissions. Disable external mics now. No one speak. Every suit went into lockdown. A terrifying stillness fell. Particles hung in the air like a hunting pack deprived of scent. Slowly, reluctantly, the distortions drifted back into invisible shadow. Campos still breathed, but barely. Something had attacked her through the air itself. She died hours later aboard the dawning horizon. Her lungs, throat, and sinuses were ravaged by thousands of microscopic burns. Her skull showed signs of intense internal pressure. Veit stood before Mara with the full analysis. These entities exist as self-organizing airborne swarms, he typed. Dormant until triggered by complex sound patterns, speech, breath, mouth-generated vibration. He highlighted the chemical burns. They ignite oxygen and organic matter. Essentially, they burn victims from the inside. Mara steadied herself. Origin? Unknown, Veit typed. They're not nanotech, not any conventional biology. Their collective movement suggests communication. Mara asked the only question that mattered. How do we operate safely? Veit's reply was immediate and grim. No airborne sound. No speech. No audible vibration of any kind. We must stop using air as a medium. The silence directive deployed across the fleet in minutes. Helmets locked into isolation mode. Common areas sealed. No sound carried through the air. Crew members communicated only through gestures, text, or neural pulses. In the Kethari consulate, Eroth'Kel received the directive. His hands trembled as he typed, "My people are defined by song. This restriction will break us." Mara replied, "It prevents death. We adapt or vanish." Eroth'Kel read the words repeatedly, then typed, "Our oldest myths warned of places where even gods dared not speak." Perhaps these were memories, not metaphors. The fleet fell into an uneasy quiet, soundless, breath-controlled, waiting in the shadow of a ruined world. The quiet deepened in the days that followed. Conversations ended before they began. Crew members moved like ghosts through softly lit corridors. Every breath felt rationed. Veit, in his quarters, opened a silent comm window to Eroth'Kel. Review of Kethari archives indicates myths about silent valleys. Request elaboration. Eroth'Kel answered slowly from a dim room, filled with relics that no longer produced music. Our old stories described places where sound disappeared. Pilgrims sought them to contemplate the unsaid. Elders warned to breathe softly or wake the sleeping sky. This was believed metaphor. Veit typed back, "It may not have been metaphor." Eroth'Kel touched a silent instrument. Its strings did not dare vibrate. If these creatures were known to our ancestors, we may have sung beside danger without understanding. 3 days after the investigation on Selra, the fleet detected a battered refugee convoy limping toward the border of the Keshari Rim. Their ships sputtered distress beacons in uncontrolled bursts, unshielded, panicked, loud. Too loud. Fragments of terrified voices bled into the long-range audio feeds. Pleas for help, children crying, the ragged gasps of people suffocating in contaminated air. The bridge of the dawning horizon remained silent. Every officer stared at the incoming signals with grim awareness. OPS typed onto the shared display, incoming ships broadcasting wideband distress signals. High probability their atmospheres are contaminated. Veit added a second message. If infected, every spoken word may be attracting the entities. Sound acts as a beacon. Mara's reply appeared with hard edges. Prepare decontamination. Dock ships. Evacuate receiving corridors. Vent their internal atmospheres on arrival. OPS hesitated before sending the next line. They may interpret that as hostile action. Mara typed, proceed. The first ship, Ton Meridian, docked with a shudder, metal scraping against the cradle as though fighting entry. Through the thick reinforced glass of the quarantine vestibule, hundreds of exhausted, terrified passengers pressed their palms and faces to the inner airlock door. Mara watched silently from the observation platform. Watched parents clutch children. Watched people mouth desperate pleas she could not allow herself to hear. The countdown sequence initiated. 10, 9, 8. Inside the ship, loose papers fluttered like startled birds. Blankets twisted. People clung to each other as the air thinned rapidly. 7, 6, 5. Crystals of breath vapor formed in the freezing air, hanging suspended before vanishing. 4, 3, 2. Lights flickered wildly. 1, 0. The ship fell utterly silent. Its air was gone. Veit's scanners registered the shift. Microentity activity collapsing. Vacuum is destroying their structure. Recommend repressurization with sterilized air. Sterile atmosphere flooded back in. Medical teams in sealed suits boarded, carrying refugees out one by one, wrapped in thermal blankets. Hours later, in the decompression ward, survivors huddled in clusters, wrapped in silver insulation sheets, their faces pale with trauma. They clung to anything familiar. What few personal effects had survived. One girl, no more than 6, held a faded stuffed toy in both arms. She stared at Mara as the Admiral passed. Her lips trembled as she silently mouthed a question. Are you the one who turned off the air? A nearby display interpreted the movement. Mara approached slowly, typed into the wall panel. Yes. The air was carrying something that wanted to harm you. Removing it saved your life. The girl's eyes welled with tears. She hugged her toy tight and mouthed, thank you. Mara looked away before the emotion could rise too sharply. Some victories felt like mercy, others felt like cruelty. Deep within a sealed laboratory, Dr. Veit oversaw the preparation of an advanced containment system. This time, the chamber was cubic, suspended in a sterile field, surrounded by overlapping isolation layers. Inside, microscopic airborne organisms drifted like fine, restless dust, visible only as subtle distortions in the light. Veit activated a pressure wave emitter. The device sent a faint series of patterned vibrations into the air, inaudible to humans, yet unmistakable to anything that listened through atmosphere. The sequence mimicked a simple knock. Knock, knock, pause, knock, knock, knock. The organisms reacted instantly. Clusters formed, filaments aligned as though orienting toward a source. More patterns were introduced. Short pulses, long waves, inverted chains. Each produced a distinct response. Swirls, compressions, sudden dispersals. Rhythms too coherent to be anything but communicative. A technician typed consistent reaction. Entities appear to interpret patterns. Veit adjusted controls. This is equivalent to a query, he said softly within his sealed helmet. He watched the organisms in their suspended hesitation. Then he activated a sharp, rising pattern, a sonic spike invisible to the eye. Inside the chamber, the entities spasmed violently. They slammed against the transparent walls, losing cohesion, breaking apart into inert dust that fell like gray snowfall. Readings fell to 0. A horrified stillness settled over the room. The technician typed onto the display, "What does that pattern mean?" Veit did not answer at first. He simply stared at the settling ashes. Then he typed, "It appears to be the equivalent of a scream," in their language. Far beyond the research lab, ships across the Kethari Rim lit up with red alerts. Sensor sweeps detected an immense cloud of airborne entities drifting toward the cluster of sanctuary worlds. Unlike before, they moved with terrifying coordination, as though drawn toward something. Tactical displays aboard the dawning horizon rendered the swarm as a pulsing crimson wave rolling across millions of kilometers. OPS transmitted. Projected trajectory intersects rim sanctuaries in 68 hours. Veit enlarged the hologram, face tight behind his visor. They are not dispersing. They are converging, as though following a trail of remembered sound. Mara studied the wave, her pulse steady despite the rising tension. On the outer edge of the system hung a massive gas giant, Chorus 4, swirling with red and amber bands. Its upper atmosphere contained trace oxygen, not enough to combust naturally, but enough to be manipulated. Veit brought up a new schematic. If the entities follow prey signal patterns, we can lure them. He outlined his plan. Engineer an artificial oxygen-rich layer in the giant's upper atmosphere. Deploy a lattice of sound emitters broadcasting prey patterns. Draw the swarm into the layer, then ignite it. The detonation would create a ring of fire visible across the system. Mara folded her arms. The scale was staggering. How sure are you? Veit typed, "It will work." Eroth'Kel watched the simulation, his expression dim with sorrow. Selra had no chance to fight back. If this gives us even a fraction of justice, I support it. Preparations began immediately. Fleet tankers harvested oxygen from frozen moons, filling colossal storage vaults. Atmospheric processors descended into the roiling clouds of Chorus 4, reshaping entire bands of the planet's upper atmosphere. Hundreds of gravitic stabilizers formed a precise spherical array. Sound emitters spaced in sweeping arcs awaited their activation. The operation was named Second Dawn. As the swarm closed in, the fleet implemented full silence protocols. Atmospheric pressure inside ships was reduced to minimal levels. Noise-dampening fields hummed softly. Entire hull sections went airless to prevent accidental sound. Refugees gathered inside sealed pods, reading messages projected onto internal screens. Do not speak. Do not shout. Breathe slowly. Some cried in silence. Others curled around each other, trembling. All understood. Breath itself could kill. The lure lattice activated. Invisible pulses rippled through the engineered atmospheric layer, broadcasting a feeding cry no human could hear. The swarm felt it. Clouds of red mist curved mid-flight, redirecting with frightening precision. Tendrils of microscopic hunger streamed toward Chorus 4, flowing like rivers into the waiting trap. Inside the dawning horizon, Mara sent a message across the silent channel. At detonation, hold one deep breath for 30 counts. This is not medical necessity. This is remembrance. Across dozens of ships, billions of lungs inhaled together. The system fell still. Then, the equator of Chorus 4 ignited. A razor-thin ring of fire flashed across the planet, expanding into a roaring storm. Flames raced through the oxygen-saturated band, swirling into colossal ribbons of incandescent fury. Entity density readings cratered instantly. 80%, 90, 97. Within seconds, the swarm collapsed, silenced in burning waves. At the 30th count, Mara transmitted one word. Exhale. Across the fleet, billions exhaled in a single quiet release, a whisper the entities could no longer hear. Chorus 4 burned in a ring of fire, the sky's second burning carved across its swirling face. The swarm did not fully vanish. Fragments of it, shattered clusters of drifting motes, still floated through the void in weakened, disorganized currents. They no longer moved as a unified wave, no longer hunted with purpose, but they existed. And existence alone meant danger. Yet the rim was safe, for now. In the weeks that followed Operation Second Dawn, the entire fleet shifted into a new rhythm of living. A life shaped by silence. Children on the refugee ships learned to sign before they ever learned to speak. Hallways became places of quiet glances and restrained movements. Communication screens glowed softly with text and icons instead of sound. Artists adapted too. Some used ribbons of colored light woven through the air. Others used tactile vibrations that pulsed through walls and floors like muted heartbeats. Cultures across dozens of species reshaped their identity, reinventing expression itself. And from this collective adaptation emerged the first draft of a cooperative doctrine, a shared set of rules known as the Silent Accord, defining safe conduct anywhere the airborne entities might drift. No singing, no vocal greeting rituals, no spoken ceremonies on new worlds. Every colony, settlement, and traveling vessel adopted noise regulation zones. Silence was no longer restraint. Silence was survival. Aboard the dawning horizon, Mara, Veit, and Eroth'Kel stood inside a sealed, atmospheric chamber where controlled speech was permitted. It was one of the few places where voices could exist without fear, surrounded by layered fields and isolation dampeners. Through the chamber's panoramic window, the scorched ring of Koros 4 still glowed faintly. A looping band of ember-red storms circled the gas giant, a permanent scar in its cloud belts. Eroth'Kel spoke first, his voice quiet, reverent. "These clouds will bear their scars for decades," Veit nodded. "Scars are reminders. They warn others of the danger beneath." Mara studied the glowing band, the way the firelight pulsed like a heartbeat deep within the storm. "It also warns the entities," she said softly, "that the air can scream back." But peace rarely lasted. 18 days after second dawn, long-range sensors detected something new, a faint, structured disturbance in interstellar gas. Not random, not drifting, but patterned, a signal. At first, the noise was so subtle it barely rose above quantum fluctuations. But Veit studied it obsessively, isolating wavefronts, filtering gravity harmonics, comparing them against the database of entity-reactive patterns. Hours passed, then days. Finally, Veit summoned Mara and Eroth'Kel to the observation lab. The hologram hovering above the table showed a pulsing cluster of motes forming and dispersing in precise sequences, almost like breathing. Mara frowned. "Is it another lure? A swarm returning?" Veit shook his head. "No, it's communication." He typed onto the display. "This pattern is the inversion of the scream pattern we broadcast, followed by a structured cluster. Approximate translation: we heard, we remember, we will avoid." Eroth'Kel's bioluminescent markings rippled in shock. "They are warning us they will not approach," he murmured, "like a predator remembering fire?" "Or prey remembering the hunter," Mara said. The message repeated, a faint ripple moving outward into the galactic dark, a declaration, a boundary, a promise or a threat of distance. No one could be certain which. Still, the fleet continued its work. Refugee caravans were resettled onto quiet moons and orbital sanctuaries. Atmospheric filters were installed on every habitat. Engineers began developing silent corridors, buffered routes between colonies where no starship could break the sound barrier inside its hull atmosphere. Yet traces of the micro-entities remained active in the wild, drifting through deep space in fragments too small to track individually. They no longer hunted en masse, but they remained sensitive to sound. A single, uncontrolled broadcast could still awaken them. Humanity and its allies accepted the cost. The galaxy adapted to a whisper-thin existence. Civilization learned to speak without speaking. But adaptation came with friction. Some species resisted. Some clung too tightly to old ways. And some could not accept a life where even joy carried risk. Tensions rose on the refugee vessel's Sarin vault, where dozens of displaced families struggled with the strict silence protocols. A small group of dissidents began drafting messages arguing for the restoration of vocal communication, even in areas where air density remained high. Mara received their petition in the quiet hours of the ship's cycle. Dozens of signatures lined the document, shimmering pale blue on her datapad. Veit entered her office silently, reading her expression through the glass of her helmet. "They're not wrong," he typed. "Life without sound feels incomplete." Mara glanced up. "Life without sound is still life." He nodded, but his eyes were weary. "And yet we are redefining an entire galactic identity because of creatures we barely understand." Mara replied, "Understanding isn't a prerequisite for danger." The deeper issue wasn't rebellion, it wasn't loneliness, it wasn't even culture. It was fear. Fear that the galaxy had become a place where one mistake, one raised voice, one lullaby sung in the wrong place could bring extinction. The fleet's path eventually brought them to a long-abandoned relay station orbiting the fractured remains of a communication moon. The station had once served as a hub for dozens of worlds, a crossroads of languages, debates, music, and storytelling. Now it drifted in perfect silence. Eroth'Kel, Mara, and Veit boarded to assess its viability as a new node in the silent accord. Inside, they found relics frozen under layers of dust, instruments left mid-tuning, hologram projectors stuck in silent playback, memory stones cracked by the station's loss of atmosphere. Eroth'Kel lingered near a cracked crystal amplifier. "This place once carried the songs of my people across 100 worlds," he said through his helmet's text display. "Now it carries only echoes." Mara rested a hand on his shoulder. Some echoes wait for new voices. He gave her a faint, grateful look. The inspection complete, the trio returned to the dawning horizon. But something weighed heavily on Veit. Later, alone in the lab, he studied footage from Chorus 4's burning ring, frame by frame, searching for something he could not yet articulate. On the 93rd playback, he froze the image. A small filament of red mist, just one, had turned away from the burning band moments before detonation, drifting into the void rather than being drawn into the trap. It had resisted the lure. It had learned, or it had understood. Veit felt a cold pressure in his chest. He typed a message to Mara. "We have a problem." Mara met him in the lab minutes later. "What did you find?" Veit magnified the image. "That filament is acting with deliberate caution. It did not follow the prey pattern broadcast." Mara frowned. "Is it random drift?" "No." Veit shook his head. "It moved against the lure. It chose not to approach." Eroth'Kel entered quietly, reading over their shoulders. "If they are adapting," he typed grimly, "the silent accord may only be a temporary shield." The three stood together in uneasy silence, watching the lone filament drift further into the dark, a seed of intelligence, drift, and memory. A reminder. The sky had burned twice, but fire was not the end. It was only a warning. Veit could not shake the image of the drifting filament, the one strand of the swarm that had resisted the lure, turning aside from the trap as though understanding the danger. It haunted him in every quiet moment. If one could learn, others could too. Intelligence did not require a single organism, only a pattern. And the patterns were changing. Weeks passed. The fleet spread across Kethari space, establishing safe zones, mapping pockets of drifting entities, and constructing vast silence corridors that spanned millions of kilometers. But silence was becoming a burden. Refugees struggled to adapt. Parents longed to comfort children with whispered reassurance. Old songs, once used to mark births, funerals, harvests, could no longer be sung. Tension simmered below the surface. Even on the dawning horizon, crew members moved like ghosts through hushed corridors, their steps soft, their breathing measured, the memory of Campos's death etched into every cautious movement. Silence had preserved them. Silence had protected them. But silence was slowly breaking them. Still, the fleet pushed forward. One of the first major milestones was the opening of Sanctum Station, an enormous orbital refuge built from retrofitted human Kethari and other alien technologies. It housed thousands of survivors marked as a hub of the silent accord. Here, cultures blended in new ways. Humans learned the Kethari's gesture language, a beautiful system of flowing hand forms based on ancient ceremonial dances. The Kethari learned human light writing, the art of communicating using narrow beams of shifting color projected in soft patterns along walls and floors. Different worlds adapted in different ways, but all embraced a common truth. Silence need not mean isolation. One night cycle aboard Sanctum Station, Mara visited the central hall. Families gathered along the gently glowing platforms, their children practicing soft gestures and silent games. The sight brought a rare warmth to her chest. Eroth'Kel found her standing near a window overlooking the swirling remains of Selra Prime. Without activating speech mode, he typed a message projected in soft script between them. "Your people have shown much mercy." Mara shook her head and typed back, "Your people taught us resilience. We honor each other now." Eroth'Kel's skin glowed faintly, the Kethari equivalent of a smile. But in the depths of the station, beyond the living quarters and silent gardens, Veit worked tirelessly. The drifting filament from Chorus 4 had not reappeared on scanners, but he suspected it was out there still, learning, drifting, listening. Veit analyzed thousands of waveform simulations, mapping complex resonance patterns and variant pressure wave languages. He noticed something subtle. The entities were not merely reacting. They were remembering. Information spread through the nebulous clusters, not like individuals but like a distributed mind. Not fully intelligent, yet moving toward it. He finally approached Mara with a proposal both daring and terrifying. He typed, "We should attempt communication." Mara stared. "Explain." Veit expanded a hologram showing fractal-like resonance patterns. The swarm responded to inquiry structures. "We can refine those. If they are learning, we must guide what they learn. Eroth'Kel arrived as Mara typed her response. You're suggesting negotiation? Veit nodded reluctantly. If they develop true intelligence, we want them to understand we are not prey. Silence filled the chamber. Not the fearful silence of avoidance, but the silence of grappling with possibility. Finally, Mara typed, prepare a controlled attempt. Break time at 1.0s. The experiment was staged far from any inhabited system, in a region of empty interstellar drift, where fragments of the swarm were known to pass. The dawning horizon, the Kethari lumen, and 3 auxiliary vessels formed a loose perimeter. Veit constructed a refined pressure wave lexicon, simple structures meant to convey, we are aware, we have boundaries, we are not food. Drones drifted into the void carrying resonance emitters as delicate as glass. Mara watched from the command deck as Veit typed the final sequence into the control interface. The first pattern was broadcast. For a long moment, nothing happened. The stars watched in stillness. Then a faint shimmer at the perimeter. Microscopic motes gathered, cohering into drifting, cloud-like clusters. The swarm's remnants. Veit triggered the second pattern, a structured wave meant to mimic diplomacy. The clusters shuddered. Filaments brightened with faint luminescence visible only through augmented displays. A response came. A ripple, a counter-pattern. Slow, hesitant, curious. Veit's breath caught. He typed, they heard us. Mara tightened her grip on the rail. Is it safe? But before Veit could respond, another wave burst forth from the clusters, far more intense than the last. A complex structure, something urgent, something layered. The drones capturing the waveforms strained as the resonance built. Then came a single, interpretive translation. Stay silent. Danger follows. Veit froze. That's not directed at us, he whispered. Eroth'Kel typed, they are warning us of something else. A chill ran through Mara. The entities turned, shifting direction all at once, moving as a unified cloud, fleeing. Into deep space, into darkness. Away from something unseen. The fleet watched in stunned quiet as the remnants vanished beyond scanners, leaving a vast and terrible question in their wake. If creatures that hunted sound, creatures that glassed an entire world, were afraid of something, what lurked beyond the edge of known space? The experiment ended without threat, but with a haunting revelation. Mara convened the fleet leadership. Holograms of captains and envoys flickered into existence in silent, glowing rings around her. She projected Veit's translation. Warning, stay silent, danger follows. Her gaze swept across them. We have survived the swarms, she said. We have adapted to silence. We have burned the sky twice to protect the living. But something else is out there, something the swarms themselves fear. The assembly exchanged alarmed glances. Some trembled. Some stood straighter. Some dimmed with dread. Mara continued, we may not know this new threat, but we know how to stand together. Her voice deepened. We will defend each other. We will honor the silent accord. And when the time comes, we will not face the dark alone. Eroth'Kel stepped forward and lifted his hand into the gesture born from silence and unity. Mara and Veit mirrored him. Across the holograms, every captain followed suit. Their combined motion formed a silent pledge. I hear your silence. I share your breath. I remember your fire. We endure together. Years later, a memorial station orbited the scarred remains of Selra Prime. The world still gleamed like a fractured mirror, its glass planes cracked with new growth, patches of stubborn green life pushing through the wounds. Mara, Veit, and Eroth'Kel stood on the observation platform as delicate moss spread across once molten stone. Life adapts, Veit murmured. It always seeks a way to return. Eroth'Kel brushed the beads at his wrist, and so must we. The three formed the silent accord gesture one more time. Through the window, stars drifted in gentle patterns. Far beyond, in the deep and ancient dark, a faint ripple moved across the void. The last trace of the swarm's warning echoing through the cosmic silence. The sky remained unburned, for now, and humanity, once loud among the stars, had mastered a new way to speak, one that no predator of air could ever follow. Thanks for listening to the end. Please like and subscribe for more.